welcome back to another video where we discuss U.S. immigration law. And if you follow our videos, you'll notice that we talk a lot about U.S. immigration matters for Canadians because we deal with Canadians on a daily basis. And with Canadians, we deal a lot with the USMCA and with TN visa status. And this also applies to Mexican citizens as well. Well, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services made some changes to the rules for several professions under the USMCA. They've tightened those rules and provided more clear definitions of who qualifies, which in a lot of cases is good because it's definitive whether or not you will qualify for TN status under these occupations, but also it's made them more restrictive. And if you don't meet these specific criteria, even if you've been on a TN in the past, even if you're on a TN currently, then your possibility of getting a new TN is very limited, if not has gone away completely. Or if you are traveling on a current TN and you no longer qualify under these definitions, then CBP could question you about your status, and if they find that you do not qualify, then they could revoke your TN visa. So it's very important to be aware of these changes, and there's several occupations that this applies to. And I'm going to go over the substantive changes for these occupations that they have listed with USCIS and what their new definitions, or I would say clarifying definitions, are, because a lot of these rules we've known. If you read between the lines, you would have already known some of these rules, but some of them are new, and it is important to understand what these changes are. So the first one is scientific technician technologist. Now, the biggest difference with scientific technician technologist is they've made it very clear that you cannot do any lab based, or you cannot do any patient care. So a lot of individuals have been using sci-tech to work in the medical field where it really does not apply. And they've been using it to work under the supervision of physicians and that are providing direct patient care. They've made it very clear that this occupation, scientific technician technologist, does not apply to those who are providing patient care or who are assisting a physician who is providing patient care. So if you fall in that situation, they've made it very clear that that is not what the scientific technician technologist category is for, and that you will no longer qualify for TN status. So you need to be aware of that. The second one is the engineering profession, and this one is huge. There are a lot of individuals that will be impacted by the change in the definition of an engineer, and this one is a change. If you paid attention, there used to be a memo called the Cronin memo, and for most part, this updated definition of what an engineer is goes against that Cronin memo. Now, there is a 4-part test that we've come up with by reading through this updated definition of what an engineer is according to USCIS. And it explicitly states that you have to have a bachelor's degree or a license in a field that is directly related to the position. Well, before they said, oh, you can argue that if it's closely related. Well, no, now they're saying it has to be a directly related degree. And your task must also align with that occupation, that engineering field, according to the OOH, or the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And if you're not aware, that is the handbook that both USCIS and CBP refer to when they're trying to define what an occupation is and whether or not your occupation qualifies under a TN occupation, and whether or not your duties are consistent with that. And that's put out by the U.S. Department of Labor. The third thing they're going to look at is your title and your actual duties. And do those align with the TN occupation? And it explicitly states that computer or IAT rules are generally excluded from the engineering occupation unless the degree and tasks are engineering specific. And it says that without a match in those degrees, the duties, And it also indicates licensure as well. If licensure is required in the state to be an engineer, then a licensure could be required as well. Now, keep in mind that typically licensure is a post-entry requirement when you're applying for a TN, but it's very important to understand that if you don't have a license and you're working in the U.S. as an engineer and you got that TN at the port of entry, but you're working in a state that requires engineers to have a license, well, if you're going to be extending that TN after the fact and you're continuing with that employer and you're doing an extension with USCIS, USCIS could require a copy of your license. The next one is Economist. And Economist is a category they picked on for a long time for TN status. They explicitly limited it, excluded financial analysts back, I think it was in 2017, and said that financial analysts are not economists and they do not qualify. Well, they further narrowed this definition. So those, and it looks like they're really attacking the marketing professionals that have been using economist as a method to get to the United States under TN status. So it explicitly states you have to have a degree in economics or a very closely related field to work as an economist. So they're narrowing the education component. And it also says that it has duties centered on economic research and policy analysis, and specifically excludes market researchers, financial analysts, and marketing strategists. So be aware that this economist role has also been limited, and they really want you, if you read into this definition, they really want you to be a straightforward economist. And I would look closely again at the OOH and how they define what an economist is. And if you're varying from those duties of an economist per the OOH, that you're not working in economic research or policy analysis, then you probably do not qualify for a TN as an economist. The next one is a medical lab technologist. Now, I don't think this one has changed much, but they have provided more clarity. They provided details that we have already, if you paid attention to what we have been posting and talking about as far as a medical lab technologist goes, that we've already said. Specifically, the patient care component that also applies to SciTech. If you are providing direct patient care, if you are assisting a physician in providing direct patient care, then you do not qualify as a medical lab technologist. And some of the most common ones we see that don't qualify, and we've had to inform people, is radiological technologists or sonographers, x-ray techs. These occupations, these do not qualify for med tech under TN occupation. This is specifically, and they state it explicitly in there, that this is for those doing laboratory-based work. So you're working in a lab, you're working with specimens when you're doing this, you're not working with individuals, you're not working with patients, you're not assisting a physician who's working with patients. So they've more narrowly defined what a medical lab tech is and very explicitly stated who qualifies through this patient care component. The other is the computer systems analyst, and this is another one where I think they've just provided more clarity. These are things that we have already been telling our clients, but it explicitly says that computer systems analysts are not programmers and they're not developers. So you need to be careful if you're working as a computer systems analyst and you are working in a role that involves programming or development. That is not a computer systems analyst, and that does not qualify for the occupation of a computer systems analyst under TN status. So be careful if your role involves any development or programming. That is not a computer systems analyst. And when we advise people, we use the 10% rule. Does less than 10% of your duties require programming or development, then you could potentially still qualify as a computer systems analyst. But if it's more than that, and they think that you're a developer or programmer, then a computer systems analyst is not going to work for you. And it also says what is not covered. Roles with a primary focus on coding, general IT support, and software developers without systems analyst duties do not qualify as a computer systems analyst. So be very careful if you're working as a computer systems analyst and any of that applies to you. The other one, and this one to me, it was already common knowledge, but they've very explicitly narrowed the physician's TN occupation under TN under the occupations list. And it was always this way, but it's exclusively for research and teaching. And if you do have patient care, that patient care is incidental to your role as a teacher or a researcher. And they're going to look at other things, such as your salary, whether or not you have any patient contact whatsoever, to make sure that this role is consistent with teaching or research. And it explicitly states that clinical roles, patient diagnosis or treatment, or any position where patient care is more than incidental does not qualify for TN status as a physician. So these are the most significant updates with this USCIS update for these TN occupations. So if you fall under one of these occupations, you need to be aware of these updates and these changes and how it might impact your current status or your ability to obtain TN status in the future. And if you don't have TN status at the moment, you need to be aware of these changes and how it might impact your ability to obtain a TN visa. Thank you for tuning in, and if you have any other U.S. immigration law related questions, feel free to reach out to us directly. And as always, subscribe, give us a thumbs up if you like our videos, and share this content with other individuals out there who you think might find it helpful. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.